How are y'all? So this morning when I opened the conference, I said, good morning, and nobody said anything. And then I said, good morning, and they were like, good morning. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right. Well, I am so excited to moderate this panel with three of my friends. And we didn't plan this, but I think we coordinated our outfits. What do y'all think? And Heather and Lara are perfectly in sync with Stacey and myself, so I think it's going to be a great panel. So we have a very important topic, hot topics in water, Texas water, forging a new frontier. So I'm really excited. I mean, we have this powerhouse panel with three powerhouse ladies, and so I'm very, very excited, very excited. So how this is going to work. There's three throughout the panel discussion. I picked three different questions. One right at the beginning, one at the end, and then one in the middle. And we want this to be an interactive session, especially since it's 4 o'clock, right? Are y'all gonna help me out? Yeah. All right. And we want your feedback. We want your feedback. And then at the end of the question, after the panelists have responded, then I'll go back and we'll talk about the results. What do y'all think? Does that sound good? All right, well, let's get started. First, let me introduce Heather Harward. She is with Texas Water Supply Partners. Y'all know Heather. I met Heather in around 2000. That's how long I've known her. So she's amazing, and welcome to our panel. Stacey Steinbach, she is with Texas Water Association, new name, same organization, which is amazing. They do water policy every day, various members. Lara, Zent, Texas Rural Water Association, taking care of our small communities, the rural folks out there, which are so important to all of us. Y'all give them a round of applause. So I added it up. On the stage, we have about 90 years of experience. That's pretty amazing, right? All right, well, let's get started. Carrie, can you forward to our first AHA question? All right, so we'll start with Lara. What are the most pressing water challenges facing Texas today?
All right, first, I want to thank you for having me again. It's an honor to be invited to this conference, and I wanted to congratulate you on your new role, and I'm excited to be working with you in that regard. In the rural areas, we're seeing so much growth, urban sprawl, and a lot of our rural utilities are now serving high-density development, huge population growth, looking for water resources to serve them, and having to expand infrastructure. A lot of it's happening so fast, it's a huge challenge. We actually did a survey for Senator Perry leading into this session on asking our water utilities when they expect to run out of supply, and over 50% expect to run out in the next 20 years. So that really leads into a lot of the discussion that's been happening all through this conference, that we really need that new supply, and we're seeing that in the rural areas in addition to the urban centers. I also see a challenge as our aging workforce, and I know we'll talk more about that later, but we're really seeing a challenge in trying to find people to work in our industry, that next generation of water operators and wastewater operators, but even people working in the offices, and it's just that workforce issue is real. And even just finding those good leaders. I think poor leadership a lot of times is a factor when we see failing utilities. They're not planning for the future, they're not investing in infrastructure, they're not paying well and providing good benefits to attract that good workforce. So I think that's another challenge. And we also see for rural utilities, but I think big cities also a lot of the regulatory burdens. That's a really big challenge. We're seeing, PFAS is going to be on the horizon, and how are we going to be treating for that and removing it? Those are big costs, and so those are some of the ones that we're seeing.
Thank you. And Dr. Potter this morning talked about the suburban ring is where the huge populations are increasing, so affecting our water supply. Stacey, what about you?
Yes, thank you for being here, Chairwoman. And this is really neat. And it's also kind of, one of the things about being here today, I know a lot of us are preaching to the choir. Many of us work in water. We know these answers. So I actually like getting the real-time feedback to see if I'm missing the mark, because y'all can let me know. But to me, it's this three-legged stool, this perfect storm where we have aging infrastructure, we have vast population growth, and we have extreme weather, all three happening. And so what we have is, how do we fix our current infrastructure and grow into new infrastructure to prepare for growth that's coming in future years. How do we make Texans today pay for growth that's coming 10, 20, 30 years from now? So I think the biggest, and we were talking earlier about how a lot of this is going to be repeat from earlier sessions today, but financing and how we fund water in the state, I think is the most pressing water challenge. And all of this comes at a time when federal funding is declining, right? And our Water Development Board programs are in some cases 10 times oversubscribed. So to me, the biggest thing right now that we're dealing with is financing. And I think, 1542 people a day, and none of them are bringing water with them, right? So that's 500,000 people a year moving to Texas.
I think Stacey just brings up a great point. At the Water Development Board, when we do SRF funding, we have to draw the line because there's only this amount of money as an example, but there's 8, 9 times, 10 times oversubscribed. So this amount of need. So it's really, really a striking issue that we have. What about you, Heather?
Well, I too want to congratulate you, Madam Chairwoman. We were literally staffers back in 1999 and 2000, and I'm just couldn't be more proud. It's really cool to see somebody that you worked with in that capacity rise through the ranks and now be the chairwoman of the most important agency in the state of Texas. So
thank you.
Congratulations, and you make us all look good.
Thank you.
I'm going to come at the challenges from a little bit different perspective. I think two of the biggest challenges that we face when we're looking at water policy is one, Texans take water for granted. It's a blessing in some ways and certainly feels like a curse on most days that in the transportation arena, you're constantly reminded of transportation infrastructure when you're sitting in traffic, right? But when it comes to water, Texans take it for granted because in most cases, as you all know, you turn on the tap because all of you all make sure that when the tap goes on, the water runs. And so it's not until times of crisis that the value of water really comes into focus. And so that makes it challenging for us to communicate to the legislature and other Texans that water is important. Planning, policy making, implementing every day, every month, every year, every single legislative session. We should never be taking our foot off the gas with respect to water. That is compounded by the fact that I would add the second challenge is that the Texas legislature has a dirty little habit of only passing major water legislation about once every decade. And it's usually reactive and not proactive in response to a crisis. And so again, we have to keep our foot on the gas all the time. The good news is that Chairman Perry has water teed up and is poised to introduce and hopefully pass some legislation that will allow us to address our water needs on a predictable long-term basis. So we may actually turn the page this session and handle those challenges in a different manner.
Great points, Heather. And we're so fortunate to have Chairman Perry as a water champion and making it ever present. Water has to be ever present, just like transportation, just like broadband, all of those infrastructure things. So it's very important for us all to have it present of mind. And I guess you guys have woken up. This is amazing. I'm looking at the word cloud, and there's some things on here that I wouldn't have thought about. For example, extremes, weather extremes, supply, drought, awareness, all of those things. That's really interesting. Pollution planning, depletion, revenue shortages, operators, and that's something that we really need to talk about. Yep. So this is great. I asked them to take a photo of it because I'm interested to look back after the panel and see what everybody thought. So that's amazing. Next, how can we Texas balance water supply and demand amid growing population and booming economy? Next slide, Carrie. So how can Texas balance water supply and demand amid a growing population and economy? We'll start with Lara.
Okay, well, first, like we've all been talking about, we do need more supply. So that's going to be a combination of different approaches, whether we're purchasing additional water. We're talking a lot about brackish desal and seawater desal. And I think also, though, we do have to be looking at conservation, reuse, conservation education, fixing leaky pipes, replacing old infrastructure, things like that. So being good stewards of the water we already have, and then we really are going to be needing new water. And I think it's going to be a big education effort. We all have to do our part, whether it's industry or individuals watering their lawns in the middle of summer and all kinds of things. So it's going to be a combined approach, and everyone's going to have to do their part.
What about you, Stacey?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we will get to those hard questions sooner rather than later, right? But I think, I see it as kind of a spectrum of options that we need to do. And, of course, we're talking this session about new water, maybe water from other states, seawater desal, brackish groundwater desal. That is a huge piece of the puzzle, but it is a longer term horizon, right? We have projects in the state water plan. Texas has an amazing state water plan, and the regions work really hard. And so we need to implement that state water plan. I think Chairwoman Pop said earlier that, that the projects in that plan have almost doubled since we first did that plan. So finding funding for implementing that state water plan. And then, as Lara said, fixing and upgrading our existing infrastructure, we cannot forget that part of the solution, because it's going to take all three of those things. And then one thing that I think we often forget to talk about, I think I saw it here, but not as much as supply, we have to talk about wastewater. Because these 1,500 people that are coming to Texas, they all flush their toilets, I hope.
Yes.
And so we have to make sure that we aren't losing the wastewater discussion. There's talk of maybe a wastewater plan, or how do we fund that? Because when we talk about new water supply, we talk about implementing a state water plan, wastewater is left off of that. And so it is, if we talk about One Water earlier today, it's all part of that cycle. So we have to remember to keep that in the equation here, especially as we talk about funding.
I think those are all really good points. And with the Texas Water Fund, the Texas Water Development Board, I call it buckets. We divided up the pie. We came up with a plan for how to allocate the $1 billion. And we focused a lot on water loss and rural communities, disadvantaged communities, but then also for the bigger folks who are larger, who provide water, there's opportunities there as well. So trying to spread the love across the state and across different paradigms, it was really important to us. What about you, Heather?
Well, I would certainly echo the needs that Lara and Stacey identified, but again, want to kind of talk about the good news. And that's that during the last legislative session, then Chairwoman Pop, Jeff Walker, Director Stepney, they worked with Chairman Perry to, as you all know, pass landmark visionary legislation that set up the Texas Water Fund. And the great visionary, exciting news about the Texas Water Fund is that it was designed to address all of the needs that Lara and Stacey were mentioning. But when we talk about the Water Fund, we often talk about it in a singular fashion. But the Texas Water Fund is the umbrella fund for 8 other funds and programs that the Water Development Board has a proven history of using and administering financial assistance to address all of this plethora of diverse needs. So what do we need to do? What do we need to do, Stacey? You're wearing it. We need to put green money in the fund. And I think that's going to be the theme that will tie the rest of our conversation together throughout this presentation. But the infrastructure, in terms of financial funding infrastructure, is there. It's the Texas Water Fund. And your Texas Water Development Board was given authority that only one other state agency has, and that's TxDOT. It is incumbent upon us to secure the resources to put in that fund so that the Texas Water Development Board can do what they do best, which is address the most pressing needs facing this state through the variety of programs beneath the Texas Water Fund.
And you make a great point. The legislature, their foresight to give the authority and discretion to the Water Development Board. So, because we can toggle based on needs the way the plan is set up right now. So that's pretty helpful.
And that's what y'all did with this, recent $1 billion. So you're able to look at what the asks are coming in and apportion that money.
And I want to give a special thank you for everything you've funneled through the Rural Water Assistance Fund, which is now being utilized.
That's right.
Some of that money, so I really appreciate that.
Well, that's great. So next, are there key policy considerations that are important for the upcoming legislative session? We're here. It's not upcoming anymore. We're here. So are there key policy considerations? Stacey?
Yeah, so, money. So obviously first, TWA, this session, we support funding water infrastructure. That's broadly flood, wastewater, water supply. Sorry.
No, that was me.
Oh, okay.
Moving down to reduce the feedback.
And there's been a lot of talk about what that funding looks like. You know, we're so grateful for the $1 billion kind of initial investment into the Texas Water Fund. This session, y'all have heard, we've already seen $2.5 billion as a one-time infusion. You know, we would love to see that at 5, but $2.5 million is great as well. And then there's been a lot of talk of a dedicated revenue source, similar to what you see in transportation. And so we're looking to see, you know, I know Senator Perry and stakeholders are working on that. We're super excited to see what that looks like. TWA also supports extending loan repayment terms. Again, earlier I was talking about how do we pay for these bigger, more complex, larger regional projects. Do we force current Texans to shoulder that debt now, or can we extend the life of those loans a little longer to kind of spread those payments over time? So you might see a bill there. TWA is also supporting Groundwater Research Fund, WAM updates. We still need to do those WAM updates. Water conservation loan programs, and obviously supporting our agencies. So our resource agencies do so much with so little, and we ask them for more and more and more. And you know, we always say the board is kind of a victim of their own success, right? So they're like, you did a great job there, here, do this as well. And so we really want to support the board in doing the great important work they do.
We appreciate that. What about you?
Well, I'm not going to be quite as politically correct. We are grateful for the $1 billion that was, I'm going to say, a down payment, a deposit. If y'all haven't read Vanessa Quigg-Williams' op-ed, she just walked in the door, that she wrote.
Hi, Vanessa. Heather's talking about you.
The last legislative, thank you, grand entrance. After the last legislative session, it's a great read. But when we're looking at policy considerations going into this session, I think we need to look at competing policy considerations. We are once again blessed with a historic surplus, approximately 24 billion, right? We had a historic surplus last session. It was even larger. And the legislature wisely passed 4 initiatives that were on the constitutional amendment ballot related to infrastructure: water, broadband, parks, and electricity. The water prop, which was Proposition 6 on your ballot, received the least amount of money, $1 billion. I would submit to you, and I believe everybody in this room would say, there was nothing more important on that ballot than Proposition 6. Received the least amount of money, but the highest percentage of voters throughout the state of Texas. That proposition passed by almost an 80% margin. Ladies and gentlemen, 80% of Texans still agree on something, and it is water infrastructure. So come hell or high water, we must make a $5 billion minimum investment plus a dedicated source of revenue in this next session. But we will be fighting electricity, which got $5 billion last session to R1. They want another $5 billion plus an extra $5 billion, 10. So it is going to take all of us. I saw you in here, Scott Norman. Hope you're still here. Scott Norman, we need the builders. We need everybody in the water community and everybody in the business community going and helping us advocate for the importance of, in a time of surplus, which Stacey's always pointing out, how Chairman Perry always points out, we are not going to be in a surplus situation, probably maybe in our lifetimes again. In the foreseeable future, we cannot miss this opportunity to make a generational investment in water. Texas voters have asked us to do so by an 80% margin. And I am on a soapbox, and thank you for your indulgence.
I have to say, Heather got a lot of heart emojis. She got a lot of thumbs up. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
How fun. All of you make a really good point about the importance for water funding. You know, Brooke talked about it a few minutes ago, $81 billion for the state water plan. The state demographer came this morning talking about I'll round up 1,600 people a day. It's very important. And what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, of course, we're all in on more money for water as well. And we were a partner with all the different water organizations that really fought for it last session. And supported Senator Perry's efforts, and we're doing that again, and we were all in working together to get Prop 6 passed. So we have a really good team going on these issues, which has been a lot of fun and really great. We're working on something else, and it's a little bit more of a granular issue. It's like another issue y'all may not know about, and that's, of course, we also were very supportive of the broadband funding. We need high-speed internet all over Texas, and it's blowing and going in really quickly, which is fantastic. They're also hitting a lot of water lines. So we're hearing a lot of, communities being out of water because water lines are hit, and there's not good communication and notice there. So we're really hoping to improve the 811 system to be a little bit more tailored, to include water utilities, make some of the provisions more reasonable for water utilities. That's just something else we're working on as an organization. We actually got a lot of calls from rural representatives and communities saying we need help on this, so we're working on that too.
Well, since the name of the panel is Hot Topics, I think that's a great addition. We want to reduce water loss.
Yeah.
And there's lots of construction that's going on, so I think that's great that y'all are working on improving the 811 system. So I'll just put a shameless plug out there for our exceptional item request. It's very shameless, but hopefully I'll get some heart emojis. We need people and resources are very important to implementing.
You're getting them.
Additional funding, existing funding, and so our first few exceptional item requests are related to people, adding people and then adding salaries to retain those people. We need all the expertise we can get. We've been plugging away internally, trying to do what we can, but it would be great if we got some additional resources and people to implement these amazing programs, and then dollars to retain them, which is very, very important. Was that shameless a little bit? Thank you. All right, let's talk about funding. What are some of your funding ideas? I think lots of folks agree that we need more money, 2.5, 5 billion, whatever the final amount of money is, but how do we get there? So what are y'all's ideas for water funding? We'll start with Heather.
Okay. These are not my ideas, but they're the ideas being contemplated by the legislature, by stakeholder groups, and most importantly, Chairman Perry. And what you all will have read about or possibly heard Chairman Perry talk about is a double barrel approach to funding this next session, which is what we were just talking about, a one-time infusion in the amount of $5 billion. What's the amount? $5 billion. It's not one, it's not two, it's not 2.5, it's not three, it's $5 billion. If you walk away from here with anything on your brains, as you head over to the Capitol, we need a $5 billion one-time infusion into the Texas Water Fund to address immediate needs. The $80 billion in needs that you'll hear Stacey talk about and that Chairwoman Stepney just mentioned. Those are needs we have today, tomorrow, ready to turn dirt, address those projects. What we also need is the hope that we've all, going back to 1997 and passage of Senate Bill 1, the dream has always been an ongoing dedicated source of revenue that will build over time and bring predictability and stability into the water planning and implementation process. But that is a fund that will build over time. So we need to couple that with the infusion so that we can address the needs facing the state tomorrow, as well as into the future. And we also, in so doing, need to make sure we maintain as much flexibility for the Water Development Board so that they can continue to address the very, very diverse water infrastructure needs facing the state. Again, these are not my ideas. They're the chairman's. It is so exciting. I mean, how long have folks waited, Carolyn, for a dedicated source of revenue for water? This is historic. This is generational, but it's a real heavy lift. There's a reason why it hasn't happened to date. But this is our chance. Again, Chairman Perry needs all of you all behind him singing, how much? $5 billion and a dedicated source of revenue to help us in perpetuity.
This is our session. What about you, Laura?
I actually do not have anything to add. That was well said, well put.
I think that was kind of a mic drop moment. The only, go ahead.
Yes.
The only thing I would add is to say that, I think what's so important is we have, 30 new House members, many new senators, and, we're up there educating, but it is so important for y'all to go and tell your members these exact things, 5 billion, dedicated source, validate that, talk to them about what your needs are. If your needs are new water supply, go talk to them about that. If your needs are aging infrastructure, make sure that your folks know about that, because the more informed our members are about this, the better that bill is going to be. And so, we're here to answer questions and to help with all of that, but we really think it's important for y'all to be speaking to your delegation.
I think that's important. As agencies, we can't lobby, but we can educate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And having stakeholders educate as well is very important, I think.
We have a Rural Water Day at the Capitol, so we'll be talking about these things. And I know there's a Texas Water Day, so join us for all those water days. And
We'll make sure we show up. That's amazing.
Okay.
To educate.
to educate.
Okay, what do you believe is the biggest misunderstanding regarding water? How can we educate to avoid some of those misunderstandings? I mean, we see it every day. We talk to our friends and family, and I know sometimes I'm surprised that education about water hasn't really filtered down in some cases. So what do you all see? We'll start with Lara.
Well, I think, and some of these have been talked about even in the last panel, that we have enough, that we're going to always be able to turn on our tap. I think that's a big thing. Another, is just how expensive it is to get it to people's homes. I think people don't understand that. They think it should be free. I know we've been talking about that already today. Another thing that we're really working on as an organization is trying to bring awareness about the professional people that are cleaning your water and distributing water, the water operators, the wastewater operators, and elevating that as a profession, paying better, attracting more people to it. Trying to go into high schools and let them know about these types of career paths, and so I think those are a few things.
That's great, Stacey.
Yeah, it's a really hard question because there's so many, right? I mean, when you all do your job well, and you all do, water is invisible, right? And so I do think we are actually at a place where the public is more interested in water than ever before. To echo what Heather said, 80% supported. There's a lot of talk about water. I don't know about y'all, but I live in Dripping Springs, and my Facebook page is constantly people talking about water and growth and moving in. So there's definitely an attention to water. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding, and so I think it's on us to figure out how to capitalize on that education. And so I think, again, reflecting on, y'all have been so good at your jobs. It's just like the board. We're victims of our own success. The tap has turned on. And we have been scared that is it going to take the taps not turning on for our legislators to listen, to give us that infusion, because we are sounding the alarm and saying the growth has become unsustainable. We have to have some big infusions and to make these projects done. So I think that is the biggest thing, is that, how hard y'all work, how much you're doing behind the scenes, and how much now is the time to fund. But I also think, just talking about the energy water nexus, I know this room knows that, but we have, after Uri, we were all rightfully terrified. The grid, is it going to fail? All of that. And last session, $5 billion to electricity. The Senate budget, $5 billion again to electricity. And y'all, we cannot have electricity if we don't have water, and vice versa. And so we have to have parity in these conversations. I understand that electricity is important, but as Chairwoman Pop said earlier, water is that foundational thing. And again, you're all doing so good at your jobs. We haven't had a Uri moment. I don't want to have a Uri moment, so we get that attention. And so that's the piece that I think we've been trying. I know Sarah, when she has those conversations at the Capitol, she's talking about, electricity is really important, but you need water for that. And not just to make the electricity, but for all those homes that are moving in, for all those industries that are moving in. It creates a link, and now I'm going really far, but it creates a link to data centers and some of these really water-heavy businesses and industries that are moving into the state. And so again, AI, all of that. Now is the time for us to be capitalizing on that interest, educating, and getting infusions of dollars.
Yes, because we have big businesses moving in, communities moving in. Depending on where they're locating, is the water supply there for them and long term? Those are all big picture questions. During the last major drought, I helped manage that, and there were over 100 water systems that had less than 180 days worth of water. I mean, that's scary, and we don't want to be in that place. You know, planning is now being, Heather talked about, you know, we need to be proactive. We don't want to wait till the next drought, the next major flood event. We have to be proactive about that to avoid those 100 systems again. Right. Heather, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to just kind of dovetail on you and kind of skip into the next. Is that okay?
Yes.
Instead of education, I've been talking too long. But I do want to kind of underscore something that Stacey was touching on. And technology is one of the things that Chairwoman Stepney was going to have us talk about next. And technology is certainly helpful. It's, you know, help advance seawater desal, produced water, brackish water. I mean, technology will help us address our growing population. But as everybody has just alluded to right here, with every gift of economic development comes an infrastructure challenge. And you all make no mistake, in addition to $5 billion investment, I want you all to also take away that we cannot take our eye off of the implications and the needs associated with AI, data centers, cryptocurrency. As Stacey said, not only do they need electricity that requires water, but there are some cooling processes for these data centers that are directly water intense. The electric community has been scrambling the entire interim trying to get their hands around projected demands. They missed the mark. There are some projections that would say that their demand is going to double in electricity. We cannot let that happen to us in water. It will be a Uri moment if we do not get our hands and head around what are the water needs of this exciting new economic development and technology coming. I don't know the best way to do that, but we're having some conversations to try to figure out. And certainly I know Temple can probably help us through the water planning process in any way, but that's another, gosh, that one kind of keeps me awake at night, that we need to figure out as all this new technology centers are coming to Texas, what their electricity and water needs are going to be.
I think those are really good points. I mean, I think we're used to looking at traditional demand sources, you know, the power plants, the makeup water for industries, but now, as you guys have mentioned, you know, we got semiconductors. So the water demands and the industries that they support are expanding. And so, as we mentioned earlier, it's great that we have a 5-year state water planning process to look and adapt to those changes and have new stakeholders be a part of that process. And with respect to misunderstandings, we're going to have a statewide awareness campaign, really to help push the message down to utilities, to school kids, the importance of water and what we all can do to contribute to protecting our existing supplies as well as expanding our supplies. So we're really excited about that. Now, we've talked about technology, so anything more to add about the role that technology has in addressing our water issues? Lara, anything to add?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people in this audience that are much more of an expert on this topic than I am, but I definitely see our water utilities employing a lot of new technologies, smart meters, leak detection equipment, groundwater monitoring equipment, things like that.
And that's all really important.
Right, that are really, help find leaks, help folks understand water usage and where it's happening and when there's irregularities and all that kind of stuff. So we're seeing a lot of that in our industry, adopting a lot of new technology to help with all those kinds of things.
That's great, because expanding our technological footprint may help us reduce some of the leaky pipes and difficulties that we have with the existing infrastructure. Stacey and Heather, anything to add? Okay. All right, Carrie, our next AHA slider. Y'all ready? Are your fingers ready? So I'm going to ask the panel, what are some of the workforce challenges, well, Lara in particular, because she's been working on this, workforce challenges that you see in the water space. And then for you guys, if you know of any potential solutions, please share them with us, because we want to hear. All right.
I'm coming from the perspective really specifically of the water utilities and just hearing about so many water utilities that their folks are retiring, they can't find people, they're expanding, they're growing, just looking to attract and retain good people. We at Texas Rural Water Association, I know there's some other models for this, have adopted an apprenticeship model, which is pretty new to the water industry. We've seen that successful in other types of trades, and hoping that that's a component of classroom training and on-the-job training, and hoping that will bring more visibility and respectability to water and wastewater operators. We're also, AWWA has been piloting a program to bring water operator education into high schools, and we partnered with that, and we're working with them on that. So those are a couple of things, strategies that we're working on, but I think as the public is more aware of water and the importance of water, there's also the 4-H, the 4-H Water Ambassador Program that's attracting a lot of young people who are going to be going to college, showing them a lot of different water programs and careers in water throughout the state, and hoping that they'll become engineers and other things in the water area. So those are just a few things.
So the 4-H Ambassadors Program came to talk to us at a work session. It was incredible. Their teacher had sent them probably 30 different articles, but they were so informed about a really hot groundwater issue. I said I wanted to be them when I grew up. I was so impressed, and so it gives me hope that we're training the next water professionals. At the board, one of the things that I've been really focused on is workforce development. So we've created an engineering career ladder and focused on recruiting and retaining engineers. So some of you out there who are interested in public service, please check us out. As well as a mentoring program, because I think it's important for us to give these folks who want to work in water a great place to work. So let's hear some of our feedback. I saw community colleges, I saw high schools engage students in these programs at younger ages, technical training schools. The Water Foundation will have a report on this very topic in February, I believe. More money, TCQ's Operator Certification Program, work-based learning. So lots of different ideas, incentive programs. Workforce is a big thing. We need qualified individuals to run our plants, to be operators, as well as to engage in the policy space. So not only engineers, but finance, lawyers. So we need a wide range of folks. Is very, very important. So I wanted to touch on a few other issues. So let's talk about planning. So we have the state water plan. The state experiences very severe droughts. The state water plan is plan in place to look at the next 50 years and hopefully alleviate problems during a very severe drought. We adopted the most recent, the very first state flood plan in Texas was adopted last year, and we're really excited about that. So what do y'all think about the planning process? Are your members talking about planning, the importance of planning? We'll start with Stacey.
I mean, at TWA, it's paramount. It's very important. Our members are investing in those regional water plans. They're putting their projects in the state water plan. They're taking advantage of the ability to get funding through the board when they're in that state water plan. And it's not just the state water plan. The fifth, the flood plan, as you said, recently finished. It can be hard to focus on flood for two reasons. One, what's the phrase? Texas is a land of perennial drought, separated by the occasional flood, right? So we're generally in drought. We talk about water supply, then a flood happens, and we focus on that for a little while, and then we move on. But after Harvey, we infused a lot of money into the Flood Infrastructure Fund. I know that program is already 10 times oversubscribed, I think I saw.
Over
in your
50
LAR.
billion.
Yes, it's quite, yeah. And so the hard thing there is that those projects aren't revenue generating, right? So it can be really hard to, issue debt for those kinds of projects. And so, supporting funding for Flood Infrastructure Fund, supporting funding for State Water Plan SWIFT is a huge and important fund for our members. As Chairwoman Pop said, with $2 billion initial infusion, they've already funded $11.5 billion. We've got something like 40-something left to go. So we would love to see more money in SWIFT so that can go farther. But yeah, I mean, the planning process goes hand in hand with the funding. And it's one thing that, we're really proud that Texas does really well, and we encourage everybody to participate in that.
That's great. Carrie, next slide. And Heather.
I would just add, planning is something for which every person in this room should be proud. The Water Development Board should be incredibly proud. nobody plans better in the country for supply and flood than Texas. We have blazed the trail. We are the model for the nation. Thank you. It is a whole lot of work, and I know there are probably every person in this room has in some way contributed their time, unpaid time, to the plans. Something we should, again, be so proud of and celebrate, and that warrants an investment to implement those plans. So we ought to, at a minimum, put into implementing the plans. And the other thing I would add is we really need to make sure that we're implementing the plans when we're not in a time of crisis. You know, it should be a constant, continual thing. But that takes money. So we should try to get a $5 billion infusion and at least a $1 billion annual revenue stream going forward.
So I want to get to our last two questions. Okay. But before that, we had talked about there's some other important issues with respect to water, and I just want to give y'all a couple of minutes if you want to say anything about them. Wastewater and what's going on at the federal level. Lara, anything to add?
Oh, well, you know, we talked about me mentioning some of the stuff that our national organization is working on at the federal level. One issue, of course, we are concerned about PFAS. I mentioned that earlier. And our national organization has been working with Congress to exempt water and wastewater utilities from liability under the Superfund law for PFAS remediation. So the utilities are kind of victims of it as well. We weren't the producer of those chemicals. So that's one thing that we're working on. Another thing, and I'm actually about to go to DC for our National Rural Water Association rally, that we're very concerned about is the USDA rural development programs being cut. Those have really been the lifeblood of rural communities, the long-term funding and grants for the rural utilities and also all the technical assistance that those programs provide. They were not the big recipients of funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and it's something that we're really going to be emphasizing the importance of rural utilities in Texas and nationwide, how much they rely on those programs. So those are a couple issues we're working on.
That's great. And then for Stacey, what about groundwater?
You tripped me up. I was ready to talk about federal stuff. Groundwater, yeah. So one of the interesting things, I mean, there's been some groundwater legislation filed. It's obviously not the kind of getting the spotlight that it has in the past. I think in some ways we kind of dealt with a lot of the low-hanging fruit in groundwater, and so what's left is really hard. We have seen a handful of bills filed. It wouldn't be a session if we didn't have a bill filed on attorney's fees. So that has been filed, but I think what you're seeing more in the groundwater sphere is litigation. We've seen, there's issues happening in Hays County about the ability of a water provider to pump beyond their permit because of their CCN and the questions that come along with that. So that is a case really to follow because it asks a lot of really important questions that are foundational to groundwater management. You've also got takings litigation, and then you've got kind of export. As we talk about moving water, which is part of the conversation this session, Senator Perry's been talking a lot about moving water across the state and how we do that. Naturally, that comes into play of do we move groundwater and what does that look like? So that always gets a lot of attention. Do you want me to touch on federal stuff? Because there's a couple things. So a couple federal things that I think should be on the radar. I mean, one of the things I hear is just, from our members, certainty. We've had some kind of swinging, right, in the regulatory sphere, and so making sure that we get certainty. But we're also seeing things that can be kind of scary, like the getting rid of the exemption for taxing on tax-exempt revenue, municipal bonds, sorry. And so that would be a really big deal. It makes borrowing a lot more expensive. I talked to somebody this morning that would be a 40% increase in kind of the cost to get that funding. And if we're looking at certainty, that's certainly not helping. Also PFAS, there's also a state bill filed on PFAS. And then finally, the big thing is, the reduced money on SRFs due to earmarks. So SRFs is money that the federal government sends to the state. That money has been reduced by, I think, 40% over the last 5 years in response to congressionally directed spending. And Texas suffers the most from that because our delegation doesn't really ask for earmarks. So we're seeing just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of less funding from the federal government, which is why Texas needs to step up and fund.
And I'll just say, it's really important for us not to forget about what's going on at the federal level because it affects our funding here at the state level. So keep an eye on it. It's really important. Now for our last question, last aha slide, Carrie. And this is just fun. I mean, these ladies have been doing water for over 20 years, some 30 years. And so I'm just curious, please share with everyone. And then audience, please, you contribute as well. Why do you love working in water? We'll start with Heather. Y'all, she's very passionate, can you tell? So why do you love working in water, Heather?
Well, this was a question that when we were planning almost got removed, and everybody wanted it to stay. This is our favorite question. When I was working for Senator Everett, he used to make fun of me because I said, water is more than a quality of life issue. It's an existence of life issue, and apparently that's not very grammatically correct, but it's accurate. Water is an existence of life issue. It's bigger than quality of life. It's the foundation by which everything that makes Texas great is built. Human health, recreation, the Texas Miracle, Justin Yancey, and yes, electricity. There's just nothing more important. It's about life. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, we all consider working in this space a privilege and a very, very high calling. And in addition, you'll meet some extraordinary people in water world. And you don't have to look any further than this stage to recognize that. You have an aerospace engineer leading the Texas Water Development Board to very savvy, very respected attorneys outside of the associations that they represent. They're highly regarded just for their mind for the law. One was a college pitcher. Extraordinary, exciting people. But I think I can say this about them and you and I believe everybody in this room. There is a tie that binds something that runs through all of us that work in this space and place, and that's unbridled passion for the work.
That's amazing. Stacey?
I mean, Heather once again said it really well. I think, you know, I kind of stumbled into water. I was going to be a wildlife biologist and chase, you know, Houston toads around the forest, and I stumbled into water, and it couldn't have been better. I mean, I think what's not to love? I think that the people in this room, the dedication, it is so humbling to me that we get to work with these water leaders and what y'all do. I mean, the fact that only 25% of people know where their water comes from is a sign of how good you are at your jobs. And so it's really an honor, and it's really humbling, and I, you know, the answers are really interesting. Impact and purpose. You know, 100% would be the reason. Sometimes I think it's too challenging, honestly. So I really want to know who picked that. But yeah, those are all good answers.
And what about you?
Yeah, well, I just celebrated in the fall my 20th anniversary at Texas Rural Water Association. Yeah. And before then I was, thank you. Before then, I was a staff attorney at TCQ, also working with water utilities. And I would say with Texas Rural Water Association, we support these small utilities and just really hardworking folks. And it's a very highly regulated, complicated business, a lot to keep up with, a lot of challenges. And so it's always been so rewarding for me to support those folks and provide them with information and help. My first job was kind of providing legal services to them, and so grateful, such great people. They have a thankless job. A lot of people are, you know, complaining all the time. They hear the complaints and not the thank you. So it's been really a privilege and an honor to work and support these small utilities around our state. And then yes, at the policy level, it's just all of you here, these women are so, I think, just people that are very public service oriented and just want to do good in the world. And it's just a great group of people to work with overall.
That's amazing, and I can't add anything to that. For me, I would say it's impact and purpose. To be able to impact an individual at the individual level is so impactful. And I will say this about the water community, it's extremely special. I've worked with other industries. I mean, the stakeholders may disagree, but they find a way of coming together, which I think is very unique and special and should be protected. So that's amazing. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you to all of you for participating. It was amazing. How about some questions? Do y'all have questions? We have some folks roaming around. How did you like the AHA slides? Was it thumbs up?
That was great.
It was great?
Yes.
It was cool, great. I learned a lot as well, so questions? Hi, Ken.
Hey, L'Oreal. Okay, I think it's my role as an adult to ask the question that you would expect me to ask. What about water for the environment?
Water for the environment. What about you guys? What do y'all think?
This is so you, Stacey.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's obviously something that we're talking about. I mean, we're still talking about environmental flows, and we're glad you're still here working to have that stakeholder, have that voice for the environment. I think about this a lot, both in my hat at TWA and also in my own kind of just personal interest. And one of the things that TWA has done is really expanded our membership. We have our, many of you know our consensus committees. We require a lot of work to get consensus on items, and we've been trying to tackle these issues. We haven't gotten anywhere. What I would love, to hear what you would have to add.
Well, I could easily punt to my sister agency, which I probably will do. But I will say, the Water Bank, Water Trust, at the board, we have one of our items, legislative recommendations, is to, right now there's a little bit of, I guess, a hiccup in the statute regarding groundwater contributions to those programs, and so those would come directly to us. So that's one of our legislative recommendations. So, but beyond that, I'm happy to punt. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Let me plant one idea, or maybe two ideas.
Okay.
If we're talking funding, and I agree, we need more funding for water infrastructure. Let me emphasize that, especially for plugging leaky pipes and all of our water loss issues, I think, as a priority. But it would also be nice to have some funding for water rights that are necessary to protect in-stream flows and freshwater inflows to our basin estuaries, which are also important economic industries in our state. We need to remember that. And also, I would point out that about, 17, 18 years ago now, Senator Averett passed Senate Bill 3, Robert Fuente in the House, and that set up an environmental flow standard setting process, which L'Oreal is familiar with from TCEQ, but it also set up an adaptive management part of that process, which said basically at least a decade after setting those environmental flow standards, let's revisit, see what new science we have and all that. And the legislature has never funded that adaptive management. So there are some funding opportunities for the environment that don't require $5 billion, but a small percentage of that $5 billion would go a long way to helping those environmental needs. So.
Ken, I just think you made an argument for $10 billion. Forget 5, walk out of here for 1 and 10.
Thank you.
One thing that I think what we can all agree on and are all working together to advocate for is additional investments in science. And Stacey can probably speak to that better than I, but she talked about WAMs. Vanessa's working on some groundwater initiatives. Do you want to mention that?
Well, and I was going to say, the adaptive management process, it's here, right? For the environmental flow standards, and TCEQ is the agency working on that, so, okay. Next question.
My name is R.W. Bray. I'm here on behalf of Senator Ted Cruz. I just want to thank you all for this discussion. It's been incredible. The whole day has been incredible, actually, but this panel has been awesome. My question is actually directed towards Stacey. Specifically, obviously, water is a big issue for Senator Cruz, but so is the importance of making sure our veterans have opportunities when they get out. In the state of Texas, you have roughly about 20,000 per year that actually get transitioned out of the military here in Texas. And you brought up a conversation about the workforce. Of those that get out, roughly 80% of those actually get jobs, but they don't keep those jobs more than 2 years for a number of different reasons, but they stay here in Texas. So Senator Cruz has I guess a desire to keep those individuals here. Have you guys thought about pairing up a relationship with TWC and TWA, sort of a marriage amongst their vocational rehab training, and maybe we can get more or create a pipeline to you guys?
I love that, and we should absolutely talk after this. Yes, I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I don't know that we have talked specifically about that, but yes, please, we welcome that.
We also do. We actually had a veteran employment program for a time, and in our apprenticeship program, we incentivize veterans, and in fact, they can utilize their GI Bill money to pay for the program. The GI Bill money can supplement their income when they're on the job training. It's all approved for that. So yeah, would love veterans to come into our industry. I think, that a lot of them are, really good with their hands and public service oriented. I mean, I think it's a great fit. And so yes, would love to be a partner in that. It's already something that we've been pursuing.
Well, and I know at the board, we have a number of veterans who are at different levels of the organization, and you're right, they're disciplined, built-in discipline, creativity, and they've been a huge contribution to our staff. And so the Texas Water Development Board, our career page is up there as well for veterans who are interested in working in the water space. So thank you for your question.
Thank you all for your comments about workforce, and I want to play a bit on what RW said, but I want to go back to your survey of what really needs to be done. You have to pay the people.
Yes.
Of course.
You have to pay them. Not what you paid them in 1980. You got to pay them, because Samsung, Shell, big companies all have water technicians that they have to have. They pay what they have to pay. And what we hear constantly, especially in rural communities, I'm not paying that. Yeah. Well, if you're not going to pay, you can have all the training you want. So that's going to be part of the discussion, the value of these workers. Yeah. And when you look at other industries, the pipeline industry, they camp out at TSTC. A kid welder, a freshman welder, gets out making $75,000 a year.
I agree. And
I would like your comments on that.
Yeah.
We've got 2 or 3 training programs. There's money out there with Workforce Board and others, but part of it is going to have to get over this hump that these are people dealing with high technology, new technologies, that you can't pay them what you thought was right.
Right, and they have to be smart. They have to know how to balance chemicals and understand chemistry and all that. I know that our most successful utilities, we have one in the room, Mustang said, I know they pay very competitively. They steal people from neighboring systems, give good benefits, and you have to pay well. And I don't think people realize the high cost of turnover. And when you have new operators and new people, they're making mistakes, and we're having problems there. I think it also goes to rates and the cost of water, and the city councils and the districts, and not wanting to have those high water costs, and that's a whole other cost that's going to be causing for higher rates if you're going to pay people competitively. But it's necessary to attract people to the industry, and like we say, as long as we're turning on the tap and flushing toilets, we are always going to need people in this industry. So we have to attract them and train them and pay them well. Agreed.
I mean, that's certainly a great point. That's our second item on our exceptional item request. But in the urban areas, suburban areas, now moving into the rural areas, the cost of housing is so expensive. In little Bartlett, Texas, which is near Taylor up here, I was looking at the housing prices recently over there, and it's very, very expensive to, for these communities that are now housing our urban and suburban workforce. And so the salaries have to increase in order to be competitive. As an agency, we compete with our sister agencies, the cities, the counties, of course industry. It's hard to compete with industry, but we're trying to tackle that as well. So thank you for your comment. Yeah.
They're a burden. They don't want to raise the rates, right? It's not politically expedient, but you have to if you're going to pay better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all of you so much. Please give my panel a round of applause.